My name is Olivia Hart. I am 32 years old. I was standing in the lobby of a rooftop restaurant in downtown Kansas City while a security guard blocked the glass doors with one arm and balanced a clipboard in the other. Behind him, I could see the soft lights, the skyline, and my older sister Kelsey in a pale blue dress laughing with our parents as servers circled with trays of champagne. This was her engagement party the night my family had treated like a coronation, and yet, when the guard asked my name and ran his finger down the list twice, he shook his head and told me I was not on it. Before I could answer, my mom waved him over and said, "If she's not listed, don't worry about it," like I was a stranger who had wandered in by mistake. Kelsey walked up, looked me over, and said in this flat, amused voice, "You seriously showed up? This is not a place for losers live. If you were the one standing there with your parents nodding beside her, would you fight to get inside or walk away? Tell me in the comments how you think you would react." The guard's name tag said Anthony Brooks, and he shifted like he wanted to melt into the carpet, but he did not move aside. My dad finally muttered, "Olivia, we thought you understood this was a small thing just for the couple and their closest supporters," as if the younger daughter who had wired money into Kelsey's business account for years somehow did not qualify. No one said, "She is our family," put her name down. No one said my name at all. I felt something inside me stop reaching like a hand that had been held out too long. I could have reminded them about every invoice I had covered, every vendor deposit I had paid when Kelsey's account slipped into the red, every late-night call where she sobbed about how Tyler's parents could not see the full potential of her event planning company. Instead, I swallowed air, said, "Got it," and turned toward the elevators. On paper, my life looked boring anyway. Claims processor, small apartment, quiet routine. Maybe this was their way of confirming what I had suspected for a long time, that they valued my bank transfers more than my actual presence. Growing up in our split-level house on the Missouri side, Kelsey was always our star, the one my mom bragged about to coworkers, the one my dad described in detail to neighbors before he ever mentioned he had another daughter. She was 3 years older and louder, the kid who took over every room without trying. I was the quiet one, the old soul, the little sister who drew in the corner while adults told me how mature I was for my age. At first, that felt like a compliment, but as we got older, it turned into a polite way of saying I should understand when things weren't fair. When Kelsey wanted dance lessons, I understood when we skipped my school trip. When Kelsey needed a used car, I understood why my after-school job suddenly went toward gas and insurance. My parents would smile and tell each other how lucky they were that I was so steady, how Kelsey just needed more right now. Eventually, I stopped asking for anything that cost more than a coffee and learned to feel proud of taking up as little space as possible. When Kelsey finished college and announced she was starting her own boutique event planning business instead of taking a regular job, my parents reacted like she had just been handed a crown. They did not have the savings to fund Heart and Harbor events, but they did have me. The contracts, leases, and vendor agreements were all in Kelsey's name, yet the family contributions somehow kept coming from my checking account. At first, it was a couple of deposits to secure venues when bookings were slow, then part of her office rent in the Crossroads district, then a string of payments to florists, caterers, and photographers who refused to hold dates without advances. My parents never said, "You must pay this," but my mom would sigh about how sad it would be if Kelsey's gift went to waste, and my dad would remind me that I had a steady job and no children, so I was flexible. I told myself it was temporary, that once the business took off, she would pay me back, maybe even put my name on something. Instead, she posted behind-the-scenes videos online and let people assume the success was all hers. The only people who ever seemed to notice how much weight I carried were my grandparents June and Walter Hart. They lived across the state line in a modest ranch house with a sagging porch swing and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee even in the afternoon. Grandma would call just to ask how my week was going, not how Kelsey's client list looked, and Grandpa loved to tease me about the Chiefs while slipping a folded 20 into my hand. For you, not for anyone else. Later, I learned they had once helped my parents with a down payment on their house, and with some medical bills after my mom had surgery. But if you heard my parents talk about sacrifice, you would think they had done it alone. We pulled ourselves up, my dad liked to say, as if family money never touched his wallet. With me, though, my help was rarely even acknowledged. When I wired money to Kelsey's account, my parents called it keeping things in the family. When my grandparents sent me a small check at Christmas and told me to spend it on something fun, my mom called it unnecessary, like joy was wasteful when it was spent on me. The engagement news landed the way big news always landed in our family, through the group chat my mom treated like a public announcement board. One Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a photo of Kelsey at some barbecue place in Westport, holding out her left hand while her boyfriend Tyler Carter grinned beside her, and my parents squeezed into the frame. The caption was a string of exclamation marks and a line about our girl finally getting the celebration she deserves. Comments poured in from cousins and older relatives, and somewhere in the flood, my mom mentioned a private rooftop celebration downtown to toast the future. No one sent me a separate text asking if I could make it. No one checked my schedule. I saw Kelsey in person once in those weeks when she stopped by my apartment to borrow my card for an online decor order and left with a rushed hug. She talked about centerpieces and photo backdrops, and I pretended not to notice she never used the word we when she described the people making it possible. On the night of the engagement party, I left my apartment early because traffic near the Power and Light District can turn into a mess whenever there is a concert or game. I put on a simple navy dress and the only heels I owned that did not immediately feel like punishment, then checked my reflection one last time in the hallway mirror. I told myself the lack of a formal invitation was just my family's usual chaos, that of course they expected me there, especially after I had fronted the photographer's retainer and the initial decor invoice. In the elevator up from the parking garage, I clutched the card I had written for Kelsey and Tyler and tried to slow my breathing. When I stepped into the lobby and saw a sign for Kelsey and Tyler's engagement celebration, with guest list only written neatly underneath, my stomach tightened. The guard at the door, Anthony, smiled and asked for my name, then frowned when it did not appear in his tablet. He radioed upstairs, waited, and kept glancing at me with that particular blend of sympathy and detachment people use when they know something is about to be awkward, but also know it is not their problem. What happened next took less than a minute but rewrote my entire understanding of where I stood in my own family. Kelsey appeared with my parents a few steps behind, took in the scene, and instead of saying there had been a mistake, she smirked and told Anthony he was fine to keep the doors closed because we really need this night to be for people who actually support us. My mom gave a little laugh that died quickly. My dad looked at the floor and no one corrected her when she followed it with the loser comment. Anthony looked like he wanted to disappear, but he stayed where he was told. I felt heat rise in my face, then fall away until everything inside me was strangely calm. There were a dozen things I could have said about who had really supported whom, but every word suddenly seemed like begging. So I tightened my grip on my purse, said, "Have a good night," as evenly as I could manage, and walked back toward the elevator. By the time the doors closed, the music from upstairs was already fading, replaced by the hum of the building's fans and my own heartbeat in my ears. The drive back to my apartment took maybe 20 minutes, but it felt longer, like every traffic light was giving me extra time to decide whether I had imagined the whole thing. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat with new pictures in the family chat, but I did not look. At one point, I pulled off onto a side street and just sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, staring at the brick storefronts and the empty sidewalk. The same sentence looped in my mind: if I stopped paying, if I stopped fixing, if I stopped being available every time Kelsey or my parents panicked, what exactly would I be to them? Not the fun one, not the pretty one, not the star. Just the younger sister who had never learned how to say no. By the time I parked behind my building and climbed the stairs, that question had hardened into something else. It was no longer about how they saw me. It was about whether I was willing to keep living, as if their view was the only one that mattered. Inside, my apartment looked almost comically ordinary after the glimpse of linen-covered tables and city views. The sagging couch sat under the same crooked picture frame, the small table by the window was still cluttered with mail, and the cheap lamp in the corner hummed faintly. Instead of making tea or turning on the television, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened my banking app. Row after row of transfers appeared under Kelsey's name: office rent contributions, vendor payments, a recent chunk for engagement decor that now decorated a party I had been shut out of. My thumb hovered over the recurring transfer scheduled for the first of the month. Then I opened our text thread and typed one sentence. Starting next month, I will not be sending any more money for your business events or personal bills. I read it 3 times, making sure there were no apologies tucked inside, no softening phrases my family could twist. When I hit send, my heart did not race the way I expected. It just beat steady, like it had finally found the right rhythm. The response was almost immediate. My sister's name flashed across the screen in an incoming call, then again as a video request, then again as if sheer repetition could undo the words I had just sent. For the first time in my life, I let every call roll straight to voicemail. It felt unnatural at first, like I was shirking some sacred duty, but as the ringing stopped and the apartment slipped back into quiet, the guilt I had braced for did not arrive. Instead, there was a strange lightness in my chest, fragile but real. I set the phone face down on the nightstand, pulled the curtains closed, and lay there listening to traffic in the distance. For years, I had treated every buzz of my phone as an alarm bell summoning me to fix something. That night, I let it be just a piece of plastic and glass. When I finally fell asleep, it was without rehearsing explanations or drafting speeches in my head. The last thought I remember having was simple. If I was going to rebuild my life, it would have to start with letting the fallout land where it actually belonged. The fallout knocked on my door at 8 the next morning, loud and frantic. I shuffled to the entrance in an old sweatshirt, still half asleep, and heard Kelsey's voice on the other side. "Olivia, open up. We need to talk right now." When I let her in, she swept past me without waiting, still wearing last night's dress with her hair scraped into a messy knot. The engagement ring caught the light every time she gestured, which was often. "You cannot do this." She started pacing between the couch and the window. "The office rent is due this week, the decorator wants the rest of the engagement payment, and Tyler's parents are already watching every little thing. You know I can't cover all of that alone." I leaned against the counter, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had already gone lukewarm. "Those contracts are in your name," I said quietly. "Your office, your vendors, your parties. I have been sending money, but none of these people are actually my creditors." She rolled her eyes. "You helped because you like having control," she snapped. "You love being the responsible one. Now you want to punish me because I made a joke. Calling me a loser in front of a security guard and half your guest list wasn't a joke," I said, feeling my voice stay steady even as my hands shook. "And this isn't punishment. It is me stepping out of a role I never agreed to." Before she could answer, my phone buzzed on the counter with my grandma's number. I moved to pick it up, but Kelsey was faster, snatching it and silencing the call. "We are not dragging Grandma into this," she snapped. A moment later, a voicemail notification popped up. I took the phone back, pressed play, and set it between us. Grandma's voice filled the room, warm but edged with anger. She said she had heard about the party, that she and Grandpa had not been invited because my parents thought he might ruin the mood with his stories. She said she was proud of me for finally setting boundaries, that what happened at that door was cruel, and that I did not deserve to be treated like an outsider in my own family. She ended by asking if they could bring coffee later if you're up for company. When the message finished, Kelsey stared at the phone like it had turned on her personally. She left not long after, muttering something about talking to Tyler and fixing this before you ruin everything, and the apartment settled into a tense quiet that felt heavier than the night before. A few hours later, a gentler knock sounded. When I opened the door this time, Grandma and Grandpa stood there bundled in light jackets, a cardboard drink tray in her hands, and a paper bag from a nearby bakery dangling from his. "We did not know what you like, so we got one of everything," Grandma said, breezing past me with the familiarity of someone who had never needed an invitation. They sat at my tiny table like it was the most natural place in the world. We talked about work, about how much the city had changed. Eventually, Grandpa reached across and covered my hand with his. "Your father seems to forget that we once helped him when he was drowning in bills," he said quietly. "Help given freely is kindness. Help demanded is something else. You are allowed to stop." Grandma nodded firmly. "You do not owe them your money, and you do not owe them your silence," she added. "We are proud of you for finally believing that." After they left, the air in my apartment felt different, like someone had finally opened a window. I washed the coffee cups, but my mind kept circling the same thought: if my grandparents could see how lopsided things were, maybe I was not crazy for thinking so too. Late that afternoon, another name flashed across my phone: Brianna Cole. She was one of Kelsey's closest friends and a bridesmaid, someone I mostly knew from filtered photos and quick hellos at holidays. I almost ignored the call, assuming it would be another attempt to guilt me, but curiosity won. "I'm downstairs," she said when I answered. "Can I come up? I need to show you something." And I did not feel right texting it. A few minutes later, she sat on my couch twisting a napkin in her hands, then opened a group chat on her phone labeled Engagement Dream Team. Between pictures of dresses and centerpiece ideas, she scrolled to a series of messages from Kelsey. One read, "If I say family loud enough, Liv will pay any invoice," followed by laughing reactions. Another said, "She covers the boring stuff and still gets treated like garbage. Loser, doesn't even know her role." Seeing those words written in cold text hit harder than hearing the insult at the door. At least then, I had been able to tell myself she was showing off, being careless. This was deliberate, repeated the way she talked about me when she was relaxed with her friends. I stared at the phone until the letters blurred, then asked Brianna to scroll back so I could take a screenshot. "I know I laughed last night," she said quietly. "It felt easier than looking shocked. But when I saw this again, I realized I was helping her hurt you. I am sorry." I believed her, maybe because she looked more shaken than I felt. After she left, I opened the extended family chat attached to the screenshot and sent it with no caption at all. Within seconds, cousins started reacting with one-word replies. A minute later, I watched as my Aunt Linda Monroe quietly left the group, her name vanishing from the participant list, like she had pushed her chair back from a table she no longer wanted to sit at. My phone buzzed non-stop with new messages, but the only conversation I cared about still needed to happen face to face. By early evening, I was back in my car driving to my parents' subdivision on the southern edge of the city, the one with matching mailboxes and cul-de-sacs that all looked the same after dark. The drive took about 20 minutes, long enough for me to picture my dad's pinched expression and my mom's tight smile, and decide that this time I was not going to back down just because someone's voice got louder. When I rang the bell, my dad opened the door immediately, like he had been watching through the curtains. My mom hovered behind him with her arms crossed. "We saw what you sent," she said without greeting. "You are humiliating your sister right when she should be celebrating." I stepped inside, but did not sit. "I did not write those words," I said. "Kelsey did. I just refuse to keep pretending I do not see them." Then I told them everything I had never said out loud, the amounts I had wired, the months I had skipped my own plans, so Kelsey's office could stay open, the deposits for this engagement party they were so protective of. I reminded them that I was the younger daughter, not some distant investor they could tap forever. My dad tried to brush it off as family helping family, but I cut him off before he could finish the sentence. "Helping is what Grandma and Grandpa did for you," I said. "This is different. This is you letting Kelsey build a life she cannot afford on money that is not hers and pretending that makes her successful. My mom's eyes flashed and she accused me of being jealous of trying to steal attention from Kelsey's big moment. I let her words fall to the carpet between us. I am not here to negotiate, I said. I am telling you how things will be from now on. I will not fund Kelsey's business parties or daily life. If a vendor calls me, I will direct them to her. If you have emergencies, you can figure them out together. I am done. Before either of them could launch into another speech, I turned and walked out, feeling my legs shake but refusing to slow down. Back home that night, instead of drafting an apology, I opened my laptop and wrote the whole story out anonymously on a relationship forum. When I finally shut the computer, sleep came without the usual knot of dread in my stomach. The fallout did not explode overnight. It unfolded over the next few weeks, quiet but unmistakable. The automatic transfers from my account stopped, and because all of Kelsey's contracts and leases were in her business's name, the pressure shifted right where it belonged. A venue refused to hold a prime date without its balance paid, and a caterer backed out after a deadline passed without funds. Tyler and his family, who had assumed Heart and Harbor Events was thriving, started asking more pointed questions when invoices arrived late or partial. I heard some of it through Grandma, who still saw Tyler's parents at church, and caught pieces of tense conversations in the foyer. The screenshot I had dropped into the family chat eventually made its way to Tyler through a cousin, and he was not amused by the way Kelsey and her friends talked about me, or by the fact that she had built her image of independence on money she never acknowledged. For once, the uncomfortable conversations were happening in houses that were not mine. About a month after the party, Grandma called with an update she tried to deliver neutrally and failed. The wedding planning, she said, had been put on hold. Tyler had discovered not only the chat messages but also the financial reality behind Kelsey's business. Once a banker quietly explained how many payments had come from my account instead of hers. He was less upset about the money than about the lying about how comfortable she had become treating a family member like an endless resource while publicly bragging about doing everything herself. There was a loud argument at my parents' house where Tyler demanded to know why they had allowed it, and when my mom tried to blame me for making things public, Tyler's mother cut in to remind them they had excluded the very grandparents who once kept them afloat. The engagement did not end with a dramatic scene. It just slowly collapsed under the weight of all those truths. Tyler moved into a different apartment, the loft office lights stayed off more often, and Kelsey's posts about glamorous events turned into vague quotes about starting over. None of it required any action from me beyond continuing to do nothing at all. While my parents and sister scrambled to adjust, my own life finally had room to expand in directions that had nothing to do with damage control. At work, my manager Jasmine noticed that I was the one quietly straightening out messy files and smoothing communication between departments, and she recommended me for a coordinator role. The promotion came with a small raise and a little more control over my schedule, which I used to build something resembling an actual social life. I joined coworkers for trivia nights near Westport and weekend walks by the river, instead of staying home waiting for the next financial crisis. With the money I used to send to Kelsey, I paid off a lingering balance and started a savings account labeled simply Future. At one trivia night, I met a graphic designer named Marcus Reed, who joined our team after someone posted online about needing one more nerd. He listened when I talked about family in careful, vague terms, and never once suggested I should just forgive to make holidays easier. He kept asking a different question: what would my life look like if I put myself at the center of it for once? By the time a year had passed since the night outside that rooftop restaurant, my life barely resembled the version that revolved around my sister's needs. I had moved into a brighter apartment, and Marcus had become a steady presence who showed up when he said he would. My grandparents visited for simple dinners, bringing stories instead of guilt, and we finally laughed about things that had nothing to do with my parents. My mom, my dad, and Kelsey lived in a separate orbit now, one I chose not to visit. I did not answer their calls or read their long messages, and I stopped sending cards or money. Through distant relatives, I heard that Kelsey had moved back home and that Heart and Harbor was a shadow of what it pretended to be online. I did not cheer for that, but I did not mourn it either. If there is one thing I learned, it is that love without respect is just obligation dressed up as virtue. If your parents and your sister treat you like a bank instead of a person, you are allowed to walk away. Thank you for listening. Tell me in the comments what you would have done and subscribe if you want to hear more.